Okay, guys. Now let's make a stop at the White House with our 20th president, who's James A. Garfield. He was sworn in as the 20th U.S. president in March of 1881 and died in September of that same year from an assassin's bullet, making his tenure in office the second shortest in U.S. presidential history, after William Henry Harrison. Born in an Ohio log cabin, Garfield was a self-made man who became a school president in his mid-20s. During the U.S. Civil War, he fought for the Union and rose to the rank of Major General. Garfield, as a Republican, went on to represent his home state in the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served from 1863 to 1881. In 1880, a divided Republican Party chose Garfield as its dark horse presidential nominee. After winning the general election, his brief time in office was marked by a political wrangling. In July of 1881, Garfield was shot by a disgruntled constitute and died less than 3 months later. James Abram Garfield was born on November 19th, 1831, in a log cabin in Orange, Ohio, near Cleveland. His father, Abraham Garfield, died less than 2 years later, so his mother, Elza Ballou Garfield, raised young James and her older children while also managing the family's small farm. Did you know the only person to serve less time in the White House than James Garfield was William Henry Harrison, America's 9th president? Several weeks after his March 4th, 1841 inauguration, Harrison caught a cold that turned into pneumonia. He died on April 4th after just a month in office. As an avid reader of adventure novels, Garfield aspired to become a sailor. Instead, as a teen, he settled for a position towing barges up the Ohio Canal to support his impoverished family. From 1851 to 1853, Garfield attended Western Reserve Electric Institute, now Harmon College, in Harmon, Ohio. He then spent 2 years at Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts, and proved himself to be a strong student and skilled public speaker. After graduating from William in 1856, Garfield returned to the Electric Institute and taught Greek and Latin, as well as other subjects. A year later, in 1857, he was named president of the school. In addition to his duties at Electric Institute, Garfield became an ordained Christian minister and studied law independently. He would be admitted to the Ohio Bar Association in 1860. In 1858, he married Loretta Randolph, whose life spanned from 1832 to 1918, who worked as a teacher and had been a classmate of his at Electric Institute. The couple would have 7 children. In 1858, Garfield, a member of the Republican Party, which was founded in the 1850s by anti-slavery leaders, was elected to the Ohio State or Senate. With the threat of an American Civil War looming, he used his position as a state senator to advocate for forcing seceding southern states to rejoin the Union. When the U.S. Civil War broke out, Garfield joined the Union and served as a lieutenant colonel with the 42nd Ohio Volunteer Infantry. Despite a lack of military experience, he proved to be an effective leader. In November of 1861, his brigade drove Confederate forces out of eastern Kentucky at Paintsville and Princetonburg. He also saw action at the Battle of Chalon and the Siege of Corinth and the Battle of Chickamauga. In 1862, while still serving in the Army, Garfield was elected to represent his home state in the U.S. House of Representatives. Initially reluctant to resign his post, Garfield was eventually convinced to do so by President Abraham Lincoln, and left the military in late 1863, having achieved the rank of Major General. Garfield began serving in the White House in December of 1863 and would remain in Congress until 1881. During this time, he served on a number of important congressional committees. However, his career was not without its challenges. In a political period marked by scandal and corruptions, Garfield's ethics were called into question when he was accused but never found guilty of accepting bribes in the Credit Mabler scandal of 1872. A moderate Republican, Garfield had appeased both wings. Of his own parties. The Stalwarts, who were the conservative, old guard Republicans, and the half-breeds, who were moving towards progressivism. This especially a difficult maneuver when Garfield served on the Congressional Committee charged with settling the dispute. Rutherford B. Hayes, Samuel Tilden, presidential election of 1876. Despite his challenges in the House, Garfield was elected He was elected the U.S. Senate in 1880. He never took his seat, however, because of the events that transpired at the Republican Convention in 1880. The 1880 presidential convention found Garfield campaigning for his longtime friend and fellow Republican, John Sherman, whose life spanned from 1823 to 1900. Because of the party's split between the Stalwarts and the half-breed, it took 36 ballots to choose a nominee. The delegates, in a surprise move, chose Garfield as the party's dark horse presidential nominee. To satisfy the Saltwater faction, Delegates chose New York Custom House collector Charles A. Arthur as Republican vice president nominee. In the presidential election later that year, Garfield defeated his Democratic opponent, General Winfield Scott Hancock, by fewer than 10,000 popular votes. Following his inauguration on March 4th, 1881, Garfield spent most of his time on the job, assembling his cabinet and making other appointments. Without a clear referendum in the election, and due to a split in the Republican Party, Garfield had to appease both stalwarts and half-breeds in his appointment. The half-breeds were more instrumental in earning Garfield's nomination, and he appointed their leader, Senator James G. Blaine, whose life spanned from 1830 to 1893, of Maine, as his Secretary of State. Garfield also named other half-breeds to important posts. As members of Stalwart's faction received less significant posts, their leader, Senator Roscoe Cooking, whose life spanned from 1829 to 1888, of New York, tried to block Garfield's nominations. Conkling later resigned in protest. After nearly 4 months of political wrangling and maneuvering, Garfield sought to finally move forward with his agenda for civil service reform and other initiatives. However, a disgruntled attorney who was refused a political appointment changed all that. On July 2nd, 1881, Charles Gitnew, whose life spanned from 1841 to 1882, fired 2 shots at Garfield while the president was en route to a Williams College reunion. As Garfield fell to the ground, Gitnew exclaimed, "I am a stalwart, and Arthur is president now." Gitnew was later convicted of Garfield's murder and executed by hanging in 1882. Garfield lay in the White House Memorial, wounded and near death, for almost 3 months. Doctors were unable to locate the bullet in his back. Even inventor Alexander Graham Bell, whose life spanned from 1847 to 1922, tried unsuccessfully to find the bullet with a metal detector he designed. On September 19, 1881, Garfield, at the age of 49, died from an infection and internal hemorrhage. He was buried in Cleveland. And with that, I will see you all in the next one.